Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Spotlight Talk presented by Historic Beverly. My name is Sarah, and today we're going to be talking about the Beverly Pottery. Beverly Pottery was a business here in Beverly that operated from 1866 until the early 1900s. The pieces produced by the pottery have been collected for decades, and examples of the wares can be found in both museums and private collections across America. We're going to first talk a little about the founder of the company, Charles Lawrence. Now, Charles Lawrence is an interesting figure because there's not a lot of information available about him, despite a significant amount of production for the roughly 40 years his company was operating. Charles Lawrence was born on July 2nd, 1829 in Beverly as one of 9 children. His father was a Portuguese immigrant named Francis Solares, who came to Beverly in 1815 and married Nancy Friend on December 3, 1818. Nancy was a descendant of the Putnam and Friend families, both prominent names here in Essex County. You might be wondering where the name Lawrence comes into play. And although he was born Charles Solares, he did legally change his last name to Lawrence sometime in the 1850s. We don't quite know exactly why he changed his last name, but it may have been because he hoped that a more Americanized name would help him be a more successful business owner. He was married twice, first to Margaret Parsons of Gloucester, who he married on May 21st, 1854. Their son, Charles Jr., was born the following year in 1855, and he also followed his father into the pottery business. Margaret died in 1861, and Charles remarried Elizabeth Peasley of Peabody, and they had another son named John. Charles learned his trade under Joseph Reed at the Joseph Reed Pottery in Peabody, and it's unclear why Lawrence stopped working there, but it may have been due to him registering for the Civil War draft in 1863. Once the war ended, Lawrence relocated to Beverly and established his own pottery. And Lawrence did continue to operate and live in Beverly until he died in the early 1900s, and he is buried here in Central Cemetery. What we see here is an advertisement for Beverly Pottery from one of the Beverly Town directories. Very, very few images, actual photographs of Charles Lawrence exist, and they are all when he is an older gentleman. So this drawing is believed to be of him when he was a much younger man, when he first established his pottery. In 1866, Lawrence founded the Beverly Pottery Company. It was located next to the Eastern Depot Railroad and along the Bass River, which connected to the Atlantic Ocean. And his pottery consisted of 2 buildings. One was the actual pottery itself, and the other was likely a warehouse or a storeroom of some sort. During the 1860s, the company, which locals referred to as Lawrence Pottery, produced typical red earthenware, also known as redware, pieces. This was very similar to the type of utilitarian pottery that was being produced throughout New England in the 1800s. The utilitarian form produced by the Beverly Pottery included jugs, pitchers, creamers, pots, flower pots, butter tubs, jars, crocks, pans, birdhouses, animal feeders, and poultry founts. The company was also a wholesale dealer in stoneware, Rockinghamware, yellowware, and glassware. By the 1870s, the focus of the pottery shifted to production of terracotta and decorated wares in the taste and style of the period. And the company's talent for creating beautiful pieces led to the commercial expansion of the business. And at one point, the company was even producing 183,000 pieces annually. Even a fire, which destroyed the pottery's kiln on May 14, 1883, did not deter them. The kiln was simply rebuilt and operations continued. As I mentioned earlier, Charles Lawrence died in 1906 and is buried here in Beverly's Central Cemetery. The company continued operations until his death, And the exact year the pottery itself was torn down is unknown, but in the area where it once stood, there has been a baseball field, restaurant, bowling alley, car wash, as well as many other 20th century buildings. And what we're seeing here is the sign that actually hung outside of the Beverly Pottery Company during its operation. Seen here is a portion of an 1897 Atlas map plate, and the red arrow that has been added is indicating the location of the pottery. And you can see its proximity to both the water and the railroad from this image. This is a circa 1870 photograph from Historic Beverly's collection, and it shows the Beverly Pottery building on the far right as seen from across the Bass River on Greens Field in Ryleside. The side of the building can be seen to read C. A. Lawrence, Beverly Pottery. This is another image from Historic Beverly's collection, and it's a late 19th century view of Beverly from Greens Hill, and it's from a stereo view set, which is why the image is seen double. The Beverly Pottery is located in the foreground of the image. Now, the Beverly Pottery became very well known for their reproduction of styles of ancient pottery. The ancient styles that Beverly Pottery is known for include a wide variety of forms painted with figures, animals, floral motifs, and other decorative designs. The inspiration for these pieces was often taken directly from the actual ancient pottery that was produced thousands of years ago. And the Beverly Pottery employees were very well known for their ability to produce perfect copies of these ancient pottery pieces. And during the Victorian era, the Greek revival style was very fashionable, so these pieces became very popular and very sought after. These ancient reproduction pieces were identified by the smoothness of the clay, the style of the paint, and the presence of an interior glaze. This is a piece from the Historic Beverly collection, and it's quite a remarkable example of the antique style of pottery that was produced by Beverly Pottery. And this is a replica of a Greek piece. We're going to look at just a couple close-ups of that same piece. So now this piece was painted by a Mr. Joseph Pittman, who was employed by the pottery as a decorator and painter. This vase is a rare piece due to both the signature and ink stamp on the bottom. The stamp, which is the circular portion that we're seeing in the image on the right, reads Beverly Pottery, Antiquarian and Centennial, Beverly, Mass., C. A. Lawrence. The base is also signed by Joseph Pittman and reads J. Pittman, Artist, 877, which is partially stamped over. The 877 is likely a reference to the form style of this piece, but unfortunately there's no surviving company catalogs to check this against to confirm. And in the image on the right, we of course see a close-up of the beautiful decorating and painting done by Mr. Pittman. Here we see some additional ancient influenced pieces. These are smaller vases that are two additional examples of the ancient influences that were inspired by the ancient pieces done at Beverly Pottery. Both vases feature Greek revival design elements, such as the half-moon leaf pattern that is seen on the top of both vases, and they also do both feature very faint ink stamps on the bottom as well. And of course we see some other geometric elements and other floral motifs in these pieces. This is another piece in the Historic Beverly collection. It's a ewer done in the Grecian style. This piece features a black background and red poppy-like flower motifs painted on. As you can see, especially in the image on the far left, the paint is worn, especially near the base, and numerous areas of the earthenware base can be seen peeking through. And this is another Grecian ewer here in the Historic Beverly collection. And it was also made by Beverly Pottery Company and features a black background with wildflower motifs. And so you can really get the scope of how much the ancient influences influenced the designers at the Beverly Pottery over these past couple of pieces we've just taken a look at. And with that, we're going to shift and talk about some utilitarian pieces. Now, seen here are examples of some more utilitarian pieces produced by the Beverly Pottery. And a utilitarian piece was meant to be practical and useful rather than merely decorative. So essentially, you'd use these pieces. In contrast to the more decorative ancient replicas, these pieces are often unglazed and very rarely feature a maker's mark. On the left, we see an unglazed handled pot, which stands about 6 inches high. And on the right is an unglazed bulb planter, which is about 2 inches high and 6 inches in diameter. Next up is an additional utilitarian piece. This is an unglazed vase produced by Beverly Pottery, roughly about 7 inches in height. And these close-up images in the center and on the right show fingerprints that can be found along the widest portion of the vase. Now, these are most likely from when the piece was being made and the materials themselves were still wet. And it really gives a good personal touch. You really get to experience the history of these pieces when you see something like this embedded in there forever. These are some additional wares that were produced by Beverly Pottery. On the left is a birdhouse, which features a glazed roof, a flat base, and it is quite heavy. We do, of course, see that little chip on the front as well. And on the right is a glazed flower pot with an attached saucer that stands roughly about 5 inches high. And these really give a good idea of just some of the other type of decor produced by the company. Beverly Pottery was, of course, also very well known for their production of bean pots. Now, bean pots were one of the most commonly produced utilitarian pieces by the Beverly Pottery. They were manufactured in all sizes, including monumental commemorative ones, as well as more medium-sized, useful, everyday ones. However, seen here are two examples of some of the very smallest bean pots produced by Beverly Pottery. The heights of each of these are approximately 1 inch tall, and the pot on the left reads Beverly Baked Beans. And now we're just going to do a brief aside. When you think of baked beans, you might think of Boston, which of course everyone knows is nicknamed Beantown. However, Beverly was actually the original owner of the name Beantown, and it was actually Beverly Pottery themselves who played a role in the rebranding. And the story is that in 1890, the Grand Army of the Republic, which is an organization of Civil War veterans, held its 25th anniversary convention, and that year it happened to be held in Boston. Charles Lawrence and Beverly Pottery were commissioned to create thousands of small bean pots that could be distributed to all the attendees as souvenirs. These souvenir bean pots were a huge success, and when all the veterans returned to their homes across the country, they proudly displayed their Boston bean pots. So next time someone tells you that Boston is Beantown, you have a little story you can tell them. The bean pot on the right now reads From the Battlefield of Gettysburg, and it's stamped and impressed in there. And this references a trip that Lawrence took to the battlefield. And during that trip, he collected some clay from the battlefield, which he then used to produce several very tiny bean pots that commemorated the Battle of Gettysburg. If you're interested in further reading about the history of the company and learning some additional information about the pieces of pottery that they produced, I strongly encourage you to check out the Beverly Pottery, The Wares of Charles A. Lawrence by Justin Thomas. It's a fantastic book, and it is available from our gift shop here at the Cabot House, and you can also purchase it online from our online store at historicbeverly.net. I want to thank you for tuning in to this spotlight presentation on Charles Lawrence's Beverly Pottery. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and learned a little something about Beverly's history. Please feel free to check out our other free Spotlight Talks on our YouTube channel. And if you're interested in some additional digital content, including full-length lectures, please consider becoming a member of Historic Beverly for access to these exclusive members-only digital content. If you have any questions about anything from today's presentation, please reach out to us at research@historicbeverly.net. Thanks again for attending. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.